Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join this session of the Canadian Cloud Summit. Um, Let me start with thanking our sponsors who've been kind enough to sponsor this event, and we couldn't have done it without them, for the continued support of the community. Thank you on behalf of all of us. And yeah, that's the code if you'd like to scan and take a chance to win that $50 Amazon gift card. So hopefully you'll see that at the end as well. So let's dive in. Today we'll be talking about building apps that understand your users using Azure AI, of course. Um, so a little bit about myself. My name is Liji Thomas. I'm a technical manager with Valorem Reply. I'm based out of Kansas in Midwest US. My focus areas technically are on Azure AI stack, basically on the conversational AI, the cognitive services, etc. And this is my first at the Canadian Cloud Summit. So excited to be here and spending time with you talking about some of my favorite things in the technical area. So the agenda of the day we'd be covering a little bit of the cognitive services for those of us who've seeing the Azure AI stack, who've got no precedence on that area before we dive into the meat of the conversation, which is going to be about language services. I'd be happy to take your questions at the end of the session, so please feel free to leave them in the chat. Taking a step back, right, a little bit on the story here. Microsoft has been invested in this area of artificial intelligence for quite a bit, let's say decades right now. And most of it comes from the MSR, Microsoft Research Centers, decades of research work that's gone into creating these powerful algorithms that feed a lot of these tools that we're using today, to the point that today, the algorithms have sort of attained human parity on a number of dimensions. If you take speech recognition or machine translation, machine reading comprehension, conversational QnA, and I think the latest being image captioning, the algorithms used are attaining human parity. By that, what I mean is a machine can probably caption an image just as good as a human does. So how does that help us, right? So Microsoft has been using these decades of research and they've sort of been dogfooding on that, and they've used that AI at scale, put those into their own applications. So the applications that you and I use on a daily basis, be it Outlook, Teams, Cortana or PowerPoint, all the AI-rich features that you find in those applications, like in the design ideas that pop up in PowerPoint, the ideas that come out in Excel, those AI features are years of decades of research work that's come out of the Microsoft research team. Now, the beautiful part about that is Microsoft did not stop there with that. Microsoft has democratized these AI services for the developer community. What that means is the developer community, you and I can today use these powerful AI services, the ones that are powering their suite of applications, to develop AI applications ourselves. So even if you are a non-developer who's got no machine learning expertise, no data science skills, and no background in computational algorithms, you can use what we call pre-built AI to infuse artificial intelligence to your applications and give your apps a human side. So if you wanted to build a Wall-E today, probably not be impossible. So that's where the entry of Azure Cognitive Services takes place. Now, simply put, Azure Cognitive Services is a huge family of these APIs and SDKs. It's used to build intelligent applications. And as it's said on screen, it's just a few API calls. And AI developers can make use of these APIs in their applications to plug in artificial intelligence services. Now, at a very high level, there are various categories of these cognitive services. They're mainly branched into 4 categories under vision, speech, language, and decision. And for each of these categories, and these go through multiple revisions over the years, vision has a lot of APIs, as you can see, face API, custom vision API, speech. There are a couple of powerful capabilities from the speech side. You've got speech translation, text to speech, vice versa. On the decision side, you've got anomaly detectors, content decisions, personalizer services. Each of this would warrant a separate session in itself. It's that powerful and that's that vast. But for today, we would be focusing on the language services because these are the services that really help us help our apps understand the users better. So digging into that a bit, we would be going into detail into each of these services, each of these APIs, starting with the QnA Maker, Luis, Text Analytics, Translator Text, and the latest one in that spectrum, Azure Cognitive Service for Language. So let's start with QnA Maker. So QnA Maker is an AI service that adds a conversational layer over your data. So if you wanted your application to answer questions that your users post, you could store those question answer pairs in structural databases like SQL or use NoSQL DBs as well. But QnA Maker allows even non-technical resources to create knowledge bases wherein you can store questions and answers in a very easy format, easy to add, easy to manipulate, and easy to update. So let's take an example. Now, this QnA Maker service can actually be used in any kind of application, irrespective of your nature of application, right? So I'm trying to build a bot. So this is a conversational agent that I'd like to build for the summit, for our conference that we're attending today. So anyone who's using my bot, they could come in and they could ask, is the Canadian Cloud Summit 2022 in February? And I would want my bot to say, so there are much more elegant ways of saying that, but let's put it very simple. The bot could say, yes, Feb 17, 2022. Now, the catch is not simply being able to store this question answer pairs, because as beautiful as our human language is, I myself could ask this question in so many different ways. 10 people could ask the very same question in 10 different ways. So they could ask, when is the Canadian Cloud Summit happening? What dates is it happening? And so on and so forth. So here's the challenge with that. A bot would need to identify that for each of these questions, this is still the answer that I would need to give. And you can extrapolate this to any other problem statement that you might have. So an intelligent bot, now we've got a lot of bots out there today, which would just talk to, it looks really raw, and it talks to specifically the pre-programmed and the structured queries that is issued to it. If you ask it in a certain way, it will answer the question, or it will ask you to rephrase. A truly intelligent bot or application would be able to understand the user irrespective of however you ask that question. And that's where the beauty of the QnA Maker service comes into picture. So let me show you a quick demo of what that looks like. Here in my browser, and if you can note the URL, this is QnAMaker.ai, and you can get started with this today. It's a standalone portal, which is even separate from your Azure portal. So you can go to QnAMaker.ai, and you've seen a couple of options on the top. I can create a knowledge base. So I have clicked create a knowledge base, and this is the screen that I get. A couple of questions that I need to answer here, and my knowledge base is good to go. I quickly show you through this. So step one, I need to create a service in Microsoft Azure. So if you don't have an Azure subscription today, you can sign up for a free subscription. You get about $200 in credit, and you can spin up a QnA service and create one. Once you've created that, you just need to furnish those details so you can put in your subscription name, your language, etc., and get that configured. Step 3, name your KB, whatever you'd like, depending on your problem statement. Step 4. Now this is the real part. So you're gonna come and populate your knowledge base here. Now you have a lot of options to populate your knowledge base. As you can see, one option is to provide a URL. For example, if you have an existing website or a portal that has a very well-written FAQ page, and you just don't want to, copy paste all of that or export that, and you don't want to manually enter, you just want the knowledge base to read out of that KB, I would just furnish the URL here. Another option you have is I can import files. So you can import PDFs or documents or whatnot. It needs to be in an elegant format of question and answers. And internally, QnA Maker has the mechanisms to parse out these question answer pairs. Or a third option is, which is the default option, you can manually enter questions and answers in QnA. And I'll show you that in a bit. So before we get into that, I also wanted to show you this section here called Chit Chat. Now, if you've interacted with chatbots or if you build chatbots, conversational agents, it's interesting because no matter how constrained you'd love to keep your problem domain to, it's very challenging because, we humans are very, very curious. Even if it's a bot that relates to banking or healthcare, we cannot not ask it about the weather, about what's happening in the evening and whatnot. So Microsoft did understand that and proactively provides us an entirely separate, out-of-the-box knowledge base called Chit Chat. So what you get from that is about 100 separate use cases, scenarios, with a total of, I think, about 6,000 plus question answer pairs. And there's nothing we need to do for that. We just need to plug that in if we'd like to. If you choose none, you don't get the chit chat part. If you click professional, it shows that the personality of your bot is professional. So the same questions can be answered differently by the bot depending on the personality that you choose. If you'd like a bot that's really friendly or witty or caring or enthusiastic, depending on the personality that you choose, the bot also has the capability to answer the question, like how something as trivial as how are you could be answered differently based on the personality of the bot. It could be a little humorous, it could be very professional based on what you choose. So that's a very interesting part. And then finally, you would create your KB. So for the sake of time, I have created a KB for us, and I wanted to just show you through that. So here on the top, you see the editorial section where I have added the exact same questions that we referred to in the PowerPoint. What dates is Canadian Cloud Summit happening, etc. And if you note, for each question that I added here, so this is the first question that I added, I do have the options to add alternate phrasings. And this is how I can keep adding as many alternate phrases as I want. And the bot would understand the application that uses this QnA Maker.ai, that API would understand that for any of these questions, this is the answer that I need to give. And also, this can be rich text formatted with images or emojis or whatnot. And here's the entire source of the QnA chit chat that I was talking about. If you want to just scroll through it, I don't know if you can see my scroll bar here. So it's a huge data set that I did not do anything for. So the idea here is that the app developer gets enough time to focus on the business domain and the problem statement that concerns us and not to worry about the rest of it. So that's the chit chat part. And just to complete the story there, the QnA Maker comes inside with the complete list of, it's a full app dev lifecycle that can be run here. You can edit, you can publish your settings, you can save and train. I've just added just one QnA pair. You can add as many as you'd like inside this. You can even test your QnA pair. So I need to save and train, and then I can test the pattern. And finally, when you publish, it's just another REST API call that any application that you choose to can call, be it a bot, be it something else. So then I can just show you that again. And let's say I know I did not train it with exactly the phrase that I'm going to type in right now, but let's see what it answers. So I just typed in Canadian Cloud Summit dates, and it still returns a response saying February 17, 2022. And So that's about QnA Maker. Let's go back to our slides. And so as we looked at it, it's got, in fact, we just scratched the surface in terms of the capabilities of the QnA Maker. There's just a lot going on there. We saw alternate questions. It's possible to add metadata tags to your filter. You can do follow-up prompts and multi-turns. What that means is instead of having just single shot questions and answers like the one we just dealt with right now, it is possible to create, follow-up prompts and multi-flow recommendation systems in that QnA Maker. Like the bot is asked this question, the bot asks another question back to the user. Based on the user selection, it would branch out, and the bot could go in a particular branch and ask follow-up questions like that. And so it's possible to do that in QnA Maker. And we also saw add, import, and export data sources and how the entire dev lifecycle is supported in that. So interestingly, BBC has created this conversational agent called Beep. It was in the beta stage the last time I checked, and I haven't been able to use it because it's not in my location. But of the many services that it is using, QnA Maker happens to be one of the services that Beep is using for servicing their customers. So that's interesting. One of the very good use cases that we have for QnA Maker out there today. Moving on to LUIS. So LUIS is language understanding. It earlier used to be called Language Understanding Intelligence Service, but that's just language understanding. So here we have an AI service that allows users to interact with your applications using natural language. So if you've worked with bots, if you've interacted with bots in the past, you might have come across certain bots that will answer only those 3 or 4 pre-canned queries, like don't ask it anything more than that. An intelligent bot or an intelligent application would be able to understand human language, like how you and I speak with each other. So that's the power of the natural language, and an AI service would be able to understand that. So coming back to our previous example, right? So I'm going to continue having the bot built for Canadian Cloud Summit. So if someone came and asked, is there a session on cognitive search? I would like to see my bot answer that. But the problem is, the number of participants and the registered users that we have, everyone would have a similar kind of questions, like is there a session on XYZ, and ABC, etc. Now, it would be a little challenging for QnA Maker to sort of support this, because that would mean that for each one, you would have to create a QnA pair, and then you'd have to create alternate phrases for each, and so on and so forth. If you take a step back and look at it, essentially the intent of these questions are just about the same. And that's how really the human brain works as well. Even when someone comes and tells us good morning, good afternoon, good evening, hello, hey, hi, hold up, we understand that it is a greeting. So that once we process that, and then our response is tuned in that manner. Now, we would like to have a service that really understands the intent of the user. And QnA Maker was great at curating the questions and answers in keeping a repository of that. But to find out the intent of these various, what we call utterances, we have another service, and that is language understanding service. So language understanding service would be able to identify the intent. If you look at the intent is very clear. They just want to find a session. That said, there are variables in each of this. Like they want to find a session on Azure Cognitive Services or machine learning or cognitive search. So language understanding service also identifies what the entity is. So it identifies what the topic name is. So this is the capability of the language understanding service. And let me show you a demo of that. In fact, before that, I could just steering away from the conversational agents kind of scenario. I'd like to show you this in the context of a home automation system, right? So if you talk to, you talk to Alexa or someone, you would still find similar kind of scenarios, and you'd kind of wonder how does that happen, or how do they actually do that? So This is a demo scenario that I have. I can actually put this. Yeah. So imagine, so we're trying to control the lighting in this house. And I have my bedroom, I have my living room, I have my TV room and my kitchen. And based on what I'm going to tell the application is going to adjust the lightings of my room. Now, it's in real world, we would seldom tell an application, turn off the switch or turn off the lights in room number 1, 2, 3, or 4. We would use natural language, like human language. It's just like I would tell my kids and my family, right? So what would we say? We would say it's time to go to sleep. And then based on that, the lightings would be adjusted. So the intent is understood in that point. When someone says, I need more light to cut my carrots, obviously it means to turn up the lights of the kitchen. When someone says, I'm expecting guests, it means to turn on the porch lights. When someone says, what else? It's too dark in here. Yeah, I can't find the remote, or this just a lot of funny things there. So you get the idea. So it depends on the intent that the application is wired to, and not necessarily the set of utterances. Now, how we're able to do this, or how we're able to actually translate this, is by using LUIS. So just like I went to QnA I could go to LUIS.ai. That is LUIS.ai. Create an application just like I created a QnA Maker application with your Azure resource tied to it, etc. And so I've created an application to just translate this exact scenario that we discussed right now. So here you go. I've created a couple of intents. It says which corresponds to bathroom lights, kitchen lights, porch lights. And just like the QnA Maker, I can actually test this right in here. So if I'm saying, okay, I could say I am expecting guests, right? So I'll try out the exact same thing. And I will show you in a bit how it actually understands. So here they say, the test says that it understands that the porch lights need to be turned on, and there's a confidence score. It's 80% confident that this is the intent that I meant. Now, how it's able to do that is for each of these intents, this is the magic, I actually trained the language model with a couple of utterances. So there are best practices on how to train language models, but for each of these language models that you see here, I have actually trained it with a couple of utterances. That said, we do not have to train it with every possible utterance in the world. And I have no idea what my customers or my users might ultimately ask me for, which is fine. So the natural language understanding, or NLU model, LUIS, does not require hundreds of utterances to be fed in. You require a good data set of probably equal number of utterances across the intents. And if the user asks it a query that's more or less around the utterances that's been trained, it would be able to map it to the right intent. And once it does that, it would be able to go on to give a response. So that's about the language understanding service. And if I have to complete the features on that. So there are a couple of pre-built models. It's extremely challenging to build your natural language model for a full-fledged production application, commercial application. But if you'd like to use pre-built models, like Microsoft has got pre-built models for person, for email, things like that, you can use that. You can create custom models, which is what we try to do right now. It can predict the query intent. You saw the full dev life cycle in there. And you can deploy anywhere. So this is what we mean by saying you can build on your own terms. You can build it, you can deploy it in cloud, you can deploy it on-prem, you can deploy it on edge. So that's deploy anywhere. And a use case for that, Telefonica is a major telecom provider in the European side, and they have used of a lot of services. Again, it's not just LUIS, but they've used bot service and a couple of cognitive services, including LUIS, to actually come up with this virtual assistant called Aura, I believe. Moving on. Okay, text analytics. Text analytics service is an AI service that helps uncover the sentiments the entities, the relationships, and the key phrases in an unstructured piece of text. If you give it a paragraph of text, the text analytics API is going to come back and tell you what it thought the sentiment of that piece of text is, what the entities, major entities, key phrases in those were, and the relations. So I will jump right ahead there, and I will show you a demo of the text analytics API, which is interesting. So let's say our conference is in full swing, and we've got ahead, and we take this feedback survey, right? And Matt and team, the organizers, want to analyze all the feedback that's actually come in. Just amazing. So say we've got a feedback that says, awesome conference, great lineup of speakers, and all the sessions were amazing. If I were to pass through the text analytics API to analyze that piece of text, it could come back and say, first, I'm looking for the sentiment. It says 100%, it's a positive sentiment. So sentiment is a score between 0 to 1. The more towards 0, it's an indication of a negative sentiment. To the middle is a neutral, and to the far end, more towards 1 is 100%. It's a positive sentiment. So this piece of text, it is identified it as a positive sentiment, which is great. And then if you've already seen a couple of highlights here in blue, those are the key phrases in that piece of text. We can go on to also identify entities in that text, if any. And then Bing entity search, just to complete the story, that's not really tied to the text analytics piece, but you get the idea. So this is the capability of the text analytics API. And so again, there's just a lot in the text analytics API. So we've seen entity extraction, sentiment analysis. It is possible to detect the language as well. So when you call the text analytics API in code, in your C# or your Java or your Python code, you can detect the language that that piece of text is in. You can extract key phrases. You can extract personally identified information as well. For example, we see applications, proactively provide privacy statements saying, please do not enter your private information in here. But inadvertently, even if a user provides a phone number or an email address, the application can inform the user that, hey, you know what, I detected a PI, and that may, you might want to reconsider that. Similarly, as Louis, you can deploy it anywhere. So if you are a soccer fan, you'd be interested to know that La Liga has got a virtual assistant, which I think is currently on Skype and Google Assistant, that they partnered with Microsoft to create, and they've used a lot of the cognitive services features and on the bot side as well. But text analytics is one of those features that they've used to sort of understand the user's queries. Okay, moving on to Translator. So, not a big thing here for sure. You're very familiar with the capabilities of a translator, but coming from an SMT to a neural machine translation scenario, it's impactful to see how the translator APIs these days have accounted for hundreds of languages, and cloud-based machine translation service is almost like real time these days. They have language detection. They have, in fact, I'd say the highlighting feature in this is the custom translator part. For natural languages like English or Mexican, Spanish, or French, or Italian, we could find bilingual translations for that. But if you have to bring that down to a domain-specific, a business context, certain key terminologies that you use in your domain may not find an absolute right translation in another language. So you do have the capability, the provision to create custom translated models for your specific domain or your business scenario, which I think is great, is a great feature from the Translator API. Volkswagen, again, it's a huge global company with so many many customers and employees across the globe. You can think about the manuals that you have in the car itself, right? So machine translation has helped Volkswagen to sort of bring that translation to scale and be able to support their customers. But here's the icing on the cake, and this comes with Azure Cognitive Service for Language. This is probably really fresh. It's come out in November, December of 2021. And Azure Cognitive Service for Language, as I'll show you in a bit in a demo, really brings together, ties in together a lot of these components, starting with, we did talk a bit about QnA, about Lewis, about text analytics. And you'd see in a moment that Azure Cognitive Service for Language, which is like the next step to all this, is really tying in a lot of these and providing a single API call to do language understanding. So some of the salient features that I've put on the slide there is it helps to extract information, it helps to classify text. In extracting information, classifying text, understanding conversation, answering questions, translating text is a lot that we saw across multiple APIs or split services till now. But Azure Cognitive Services is a unifying service there. And to demonstrate that, this great tool that's available from Microsoft, it's called the Language Studio, and you can check this out right away. As I show you this, you'd realize the kind of capabilities that are available in here. You can, as we discussed, you can extract information, you can classify text, you can answer questions, which was previously QnA Maker. You can understand conversational language. I think that bit alone is in beta right now, and you can translate text as well. If you care to look at, these various options here, each of this has got a demo behind. You've also got sample code to support this, and I'd be happy to show you through some of these, like extract PII, right? So this is something that we just discussed. So if I'm going to select a language, English, and my combine. Let's try this. So this is a piece of text that I'm going to just feed it, and I'm going to just run this to see the kind of PI information that it extracted out of this. So if you see right off the bat, that there was quite a few personal information that was in there, and it's right. It identifies the date, time, the person, the URL, a phone number, email, maybe SSN, like whatnot, right? And then if you go on to see, you would see sample codes and then API references. But at the end of the day, these are simple API calls that you can call in your respective application to get these kind of features. If you want to understand PII, don't have to create a module or build the code from scratch. And then likewise, if you want to extract key phrases, named entities, we saw a couple of this. Summarized documents is really cool. If you want to try this, that's in English. And so let's say I have a huge piece of text and I want to just summarize that. And I want to just get tell me TDLR, like just the first 2 or 3 sentences, what makes most sense. I can reduce that to 3 or 2 or 1 or how many ever sentences, right? Let's try this. Let's try one that talks about COVID, and you can see how huge that text is. Or maybe you'll try with Redmond. I can try. Okay, so this is about, I think, the Activision Blizzard. So let's try and let's see what it comes up with. So this is also very useful if you want to think about, in a conversational agent scenario, you'd go and you browse and you see this huge piece of text. I don't want to return everything. In a search engine example, it's a perfect example. If you ask the search engine a question, you would love to see direct responses, like talking back to the point. It would help to have a summarized response. So you can use these kind of services. So here's the summary that it created. This is the original piece of text, and it shows you exactly where it took that summary piece of text from. So depending on the application that you want to create, be it a search engine, be it a conversational agent, you can build intelligent applications that will understand what your users are trying to ask and respond accordingly. Similarly, analyze sentiments and mind opinions. Just take a look at the time so that, okay, we have time. I'm happy to show you through this as well. Similarly, if I have to analyze sentiments and opinions, I'm going to take English here, and I'm going to take a piece of text. Right? I'm going to run that. And we did talk a bit about sentiments, about scoring it as positive, neutral, and negative. And it's interestingly, if you see here, it does not give one full score. It says it's 86% positive and 14% negative. And it just scores the entire piece. And there's one thing I'd like to highlight and call out here, which I think is very, very helpful. In addition to sentiment analysis, text analytics, so this was previously coming from the Text Analytics API. Text Analytics V3 has a new feature which helps with opinion mining. Now, what that means is, even when a user gives, say, a feedback, right? You give a feedback about the summit or about the conference, or let's say we go to, it's a TripAdvisor survey. And the person posts a review on TripAdvisor saying, I liked the room, but I did not like the food. So it is very difficult. So that's the beauty of the human language. Again, I would say it's very difficult for us to classify even one single sentence as outright positive or negative. And I think the next level to that is understanding the emotions and mining opinions even within a sentence. So if I have to take just this one sentence, right? We went to Contours of Food Place located at downtown Seattle last week for dinner party, and we adored the spot. And it really understands that, spot is the entity that we're talking about, and the opinion is about the spot, and adoration comes into play. So likewise, they provided marvelous food. It's almost like English. It identifies the verbs and the nouns and everything. So all in, you get a fantastic analysis of that piece of text compared to just outright positive, negative, or neutral sentiment. So these are the kind of powerful capabilities that are available from language APIs. And this is just one that we've tried in terms of analyze sentiments and opinions. If you have to, for example, if you have a lot of user reviews that's coming for your customer website, and obviously customers love to give feedback and reviews, comments, and if you have a whole Excel or a Power BI report, which is generally where you would look at all this, I mean, how tedious would it be for you to manually go through each of that, your customer service agents to go through that and to manually score and really understand where exactly the problem is. So you can imagine these kind of AI services that will, again, better understand your users, because it gives you the capability to build applications that have eyes, that have ears, that have the understanding of your users' responses. Likewise, detecting language. This is the answer questions part, which is the currently recommended piece. We were talking about QnA Maker. So even if you have to go to QnA Maker today, just scroll up. I don't know if you noted this, but it says, we strongly recommend you to use the question answering feature in Azure Cognitive Service for language. So this is that feature. This is the API call that they're referring to, only because this is a lot more powerful than the other one. And likewise, we have one for Luis as well. So just like we built it out for the QnA Maker, I can select a question here. I can select a language. And let's say I have a huge piece of text. And let's say this is on sustainable development goals, the UN SDGs. I can ask it a specific question. What are sustainable development goals? And it would return an answer. Again, there's a long answer, and it also has a capability to return a short answer. One thing to note that a confidence score is always attached to a response. So if a response has a confidence score of 97.9, what that means is the service, the AI service, is pretty confident that this is a good answer. Sometimes it will return an answer, but the confidence score can be really below like 20%, 30%. So practically what you might want to do is keep a threshold within your application and maybe not entertain responses that fall below a certain threshold as well. But that's practical purposes. So here's another example, great example of how you can answer questions. Likewise, there's just so many capabilities now, AI services that have Unison in this language studio, which is just a great UI to try out these APIs and see how they're functioning before you can actually delve into the code, call these APIs, create Azure resource, call these APIs into your actual applications. So that's about the language studio. And as I go back to my presentation, I would like to summarize this in terms of, we did a lot on the Azure Cognitive Services. We talked a bit about a lot, but majorly around the language services, which is about QnA Maker, Louis, text analytics, briefly on the translator, and Azure Cognitive Service for language, which is the latest and greatest in the stack today. So with that, I will come to the end of my presentation, but I am happy to take your questions, if any, from the chat or otherwise as well. And I believe you would get access to this presentation. So I have left a couple of reference links to each of the services that we have discussed today. And also a final word of thanks to our sponsors once again for supporting the community. If you want one more chance at scanning that and giving me some feedback, that would be really appreciated. So I'll open it up for Q&A, and we'll take it from there. Over to you, Matt.
Just while we wait for some questions to come in, I might just share my screen with your QR code and link up there for the feedback.
Absolutely.
But yes, thank you so much for sharing your time with us to teach us. I think I'm always blown away by the demos and that around AI and ML. I think every 6 months it gets so much easier, and I don't think people realize how easy it is now with the machine learning, machine vision, machine imaging, and stuff like that. So my biggest problem in my office is I have too many voice activated devices that I have to be careful that I don't accidentally trigger them by using trigger words. So, but yeah, no, it's been really great listening to you. I can't believe how much you actually covered there. It was really good.
Thank you, Matt. I think Alex is asking what is your session code, and is that something you can help with, Matt?
Yeah, I didn't see that you had the session code there, but when people go to, I don't have it on hand, but if people go to this link and there'll be a drop down,
okay,
and you'll be able to see the name of this talk plus your name, and that'll be enough. It's just the session code does make my life easier later when we're doing the draw by filtering by session codes, but I will be manually double checking anyway. So, okay. So for this one, don't stress too much, everybody, about the session code. It's nice to have, but there is a big drop down list at the start of the survey that you can pick.
Sure. Thank you, Alex. Anything else? Oh boy, I did finish it a couple of months. I think I even started a few minutes earlier, but that was great. Thank you, Dennis. Merci, gracias. I must use a translator for sure, but I understand that. Thank you. Thank you, sir. And if you have any questions after the session as well, I'm most happy to connect with you on LinkedIn or on Twitter. Be easy to find me. Thank you, and I wish we stay connected and we chat a bit about Azure AI.